So this is currently Braun-Duin playing against Andrew Jessup, I believe.
Yes, I think those names are incorrect right there on the screen. And I believe Braun-Duin is the player on the left. Unless this is the unless we're watching a different match here. Here we are. Eli Cassis, that's right.
So Ely, actually.
Ely, oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So Ely Cassis against Koji Kamichika.
We've got a Ruthless Sniper in play
On
Cassis' side of the table, followed up by a Battlefield Scrounger. When something is exerted, you may rummage. And here we have Koji playing an Unwavering Initiate, 3-Tooth Vigilance, Embalm for 5. Both players currently sitting at 6-0, a nice place to be at this point in the day. Black-red, a very aggressive deck, and he started off quite nicely with a 1-drop into a 2-drop. Let's see if we can follow up with a 3.
Yeah, Ruthless Sniper combos really well with a
red, black, discard themed deck. Here we saw a cycle with Desert Ceradon. 2 -1/-1 counters on the Unwavering Initiate will send it to the graveyard from a cycle and a discard thanks to the Exert on the Battlefield Scrounger.
Yeah, Ruthless Sniper is a card that's really impressed me a lot. I don't know if you've had a chance
absolutely.
to play with it, but
I played against somebody who had 3 of them.
ooh. And when you have multiples, it just
Yeah.
does disgusting things.
Pecks in for 1 here, followed up by a Gravedigger that's going to get Essence scattered. I assume was going to attempt to get back that Ceradon.
Which is pretty cool, because then he could cycle it again. Create more havoc for Koji. And the nice thing about Ruthless Sniper is that it continues to be good even in the later game, even though it's only providing -1/-1 counters, because it just makes combat a nightmare for the opponent.
Yes.
You know, you like attack with all your guys, and how do they set up blocks? They don't know how many
they
counters
don't know.
they're going to throw places and what's going to happen. It's pretty good.
So here we have an Embalm coming down for a 3-2 Vigilance, Unwavering Initiate. Lay Bare the Heart is the play here from Cassis. Going to take a look at, look what he's found. An Angel of Sanctions, final reward, Mighty Leap, and Desert Caravan.
Yeah, Desert Caravan, another card that makes the cut surprisingly often.
It does.
It plays a role really nicely.
So Lay Bare the Heart is going to take any non-legendary, non-land card out of Koji's hand. Angel of Sanctions, not legendary, notably. Just a fantastic card. I had one in my pre-release pool, and it was easily my all-star. There we're taking a look. It is 5 mana for a 3/4 flyer, and basically exiles a non-land permanent opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. And then if it somehow leaves the battlefield, guess what? It has Embalm for 6. So
yeah, I think that's definitely one of the best cards you could possibly get in this limited format.
So Cassis alleging to take the Caravan here. That's interesting. Getting in for 3. Oh. With an Exalt again on the Battlefield Scrounger to put a -1/-1 counter on the embalmed version of Unwavering Initiate, dropping Koji to 15. So what would be the reason he would take the Caravan in this situation?
I think that's a pretty strong tell that he has, what is it, Final Rest in hand.
Sure.
Because then he's going to be exiling the Angel with that
Right.
card.
And if he put it in the graveyard, Koji could just embalm it.
Correct. So
Well, Koji's like, all right, well, let's do this. Here it is. Do your worst.
yeah, so final reward. Sorry.
I think. Oh. Wander in Death is the play to get back 2 creature cards from the graveyard, getting back a Desert Ceradon and a Grave Wanderer. Grave Digger. There you go. Just as you described, cycling the Ceradon again to draw another card. Unfortunately, does not have the Sniper at this time to put any -1/-1 counters on anything.
So perhaps Ely did not have the final reward and instead just did not want to make Koji discard the Angel because he knew it would just be embalmed.
Which I suppose is something.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems reasonable. I mean, it's not like Koji's going to be removing that impressive of a permanent, although the Ruthless Sniper is pretty good in Ely's deck.
Yeah, he certainly has a lot of cycling and discarding going on to enable the Sniper.
This would be a very good turn for Ely to use a card like Final Reward.
We have a Merciless Javelineer instead. Koji's going to take a look at that card. It is a 4/2. You can pay 2 mana to discard a card, put a -1/-1 counter on something, which is doing right now. That creature cannot block this turn. Well, that creature's just dead in this case.
Yeah. Ely electing not to exert his battlefield Scavenger this turn.
Though that Battlefield Scavenger has certainly done some work for him, managing to help out that Sniper quite a lot early on in the game. We have a Taw Crop Skirmisher here for Koji. It's just a little 2/1, embalms for 4. Like we've been saying most of today, all of the embalm creatures reasonable.
Absolutely.
Just for the fact they have embalm.
Yeah, it just provides a lot of advantage over the course of a longer game.
And the Javelineer promptly putting a -1/-1 counter on that Skirmisher to send it to the graveyard. Koji drops to 4, and in comes a Horror of the Broken Lands. Definitely a card that's good with cycling.
Yeah, that card can kill somebody completely out of nowhere in a deck like Ely, so we've already seen so much cycling, and there's plenty more here when you take a look at the deck list.
Koji in a tough spot, too.
Yeah, Ely gets to pump that Horror of the Broken Lands, even just by discarding to his Javelineer here, so...
That's true. And you mentioned the power of the Javelineer to make things not block. I mean, no matter what Koji does, if he just plays some creatures out, well, they can't block. What are you going to do? You're at 4.
Yeah, it's one of the best cards at closing games in the entire set.
Here comes the Skirmisher back as an embalmed white zombie. A zombie snake seems like something that would be particularly terrifying.
It does seem like a particularly terrifying type of zombie.
Mighty Leap. But Electrify will say, no thank you. 2 -1/-1 counters. Nobody can block. And that'll do it. Ely takes game 1 over Koji. Red-black. Rakdos power.
Yeah, and that's the thing about a card like Javelineer is that even if you're... All right, so that's the thing about the Javelineer is that even when you get to, save your guy with a card like Mighty Leap, your opponent can still just finish you off by making it so that you can't block, and it'll end the game.
Here we're going to go to our main match, Andrew Jessup versus Braun-Duin, 13-11. Both players with 4 permanents on the battlefield right now. Andrew lining up an attack. He's got a couple of Taw Crop Skirmishers, a Fan Bear. Meanwhile, there is that Archfiend of Ifnir we talked about that Braun-Duin has on his side of the table, as well as an enchanted Aven Initiate that's wearing a cartouche, and one that isn't.
Aven Initiate is one of those cards that I'll just basically play as many of as I can get.
Yeah. It's just solid, right? It doesn't cost too much, and it embalms for a pretty expensive amount, but it still embalms.
It's also a great excuse to play a lot of lands, which is a hard thing to do in this format. Like, I'm always like, oh, man, I can't really play more than 16 in this deck. But then if I eat a bunch of those, I'm like, oh, well, I want to get to 7.
Are you consistently finding yourself running 16 in this format?
Very often because of how much cycling I'll end up playing.
Here's another cartouche of knowledge. BBD will draw a card that even now has double flying.
And that's a really interesting thing we saw there, just because he put the cartouche on an Aven Initiate that was not already powered up by something else. It kind of forces Andrew into a spot where even if he has some sort of instant speed trick, he can't interact to stop the cartouche from coming down, because if he has that trick, he's going to want to use it for Archfiend of Ifnir or for the life-linking Aven Initiate here.
So BBD did cycle this turn, or discard a card, thanks to Seeker of Insight, which you're able to draw and discard if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, putting some -1/-1 counters on Andrew's creatures, thanks to the Archfiend. The Archfiend, what a beating.
Yeah, the card is so unfair.
And it's going to get in there along with the Aven Initiate for 9. Take a look at that bad boy right there. Followed up by a Bone Picker. 3/2 Death Touch flying. Braun-Duin doesn't do it unless it's in the air.
Yeah, he's entirely in the air here. He's got a Seeker of Insight on the ground, but that's just destroying his opponent's creatures every single turn. That's not doing much else.
Andrew's going to see if he can put something together here. Does have a Fan Bear, which stems the bleeding a little bit, but I've got to be terrified if I'm him that BBD is going to cycle or discard anything.
Yeah, I mean, he's so far behind here. And from the looks of it, I think Braun-Duin discarded New Perspectives.
Yes, he did.
So if that's what he's discarding, I mean, you know that his hand has something incredible in it. It's just... This situation is not going to work out well for you.
Here's a look at New Perspectives. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. So he's like, no, I don't think I need to draw 3. I've got everything I need.
And I mean, it's obviously one of the best cards you'd have when you're drawing off the top or out of other spells to cast, because you get 3 fresh cards. But if you're going to win the game without those 3 fresh cards, then you don't need it.
Have you ever had the second part of New Perspectives be live?
I've not. I haven't seen it be live even.
Oh, here's another cycle. Yeah, Andrew's just going to scoop him up. Braun-Duin takes game 1 here in this match, round 7.
Yeah, Archfiend of Ifnir is pretty good card.
But you still think Glorybringer's better?
I do. I think Glorybringer's better. I think Archfiend of Ifnir, it doesn't need help to be good. I mean, it's just an absurd card.
5/4/5.
Yeah, and you're often playing some things that cycle just happenstance, and that makes it absurd. But Glorybringer needs no help. You know, you could have nothing in your hand and draw a Glorybringer off the top and be way behind, and Glorybringer is going to be absurd. And on curve, Glorybringer does more the turn it comes into play. It's just, you can lose a good amount of games where you cast Archfiend of Ifnir, even if you have the stuff to go with it. You know, like your opponent gets to untap and maybe interact with it, maybe kill it somehow or another. With Glorybringer, even when they do that, you've already gained so much of an advantage.
Yeah, taking a look here at Braun-Duin's deck list, he's got a lot of cards that cycle. We've got 2 Shimmer Scale Drakes and a lot of cartouche. He's had, I don't know the plural of cartouche. Cartouches, 2 Cartouche of Ambition, 2 Cartouche of Knowledge, and there's 2 Avian Initiates for you in there. So we'll come back and see the conclusion of this match after these messages. Welcome back to coverage of Grand Prix Richmond. Maria Bertholdi here in the booth alongside JVL, Andrew Jessup on the left side of your screen versus Brian Braun-Duin. Jessup, of course, an SCG Open player, won SCG Atlanta just last weekend.
So he's on a pretty hot streak here.
Yeah, he is.
Starting off 6-0. Just won a big tournament the weekend before. Brian Braun-Duin also on a pretty hot streak. He's just the world champion.
Just the world champion. No big deal.
No big deal. There's a world. He's the champion of it.
Brian Braun-Duin kicking things off with a festering mummy. Andrew Jessup, a zombie of his own, binding mummy.
That's not something that happens very often in lore, is two zombies fighting one another.
Yeah, and the new zombie, the white zombies, versus the traditionally black zombies. Here comes a Labyrinth Guardian for BBD. 2/3, target of a spell or ability. You have to sacrifice it.
Just a spell.
Oh, sorry. Yes, just a spell.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's normally what it is, but this is better.
Yeah. If it died to a binding mummy trigger, it would not be
pretty bad.
It would not be as exciting as it currently is. As it stands, it's great. I love it.
And embalm for 4. We said, if this soaks up a spell, great. Brian Braun-Duin just going to smash in.
The other thing is that blue doesn't have many good 2-mana cards.
There's an Ancient Crab for Brian Braun-Duin. Can't lose now, probably.
I mean, that's my kind of card. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very into the generic low power, very high toughness creatures.
Andrew Jessup is going to cycle Oketra's Attendant, which is fine because it does have Embalm for the same as its mana cost, which is 5. An Aven Wind Guide hits the table for Jessup. 2/3 Vigilance Flying. Tokens you control. Creature tokens you control have Flying and Vigilance. It also has Embalm.
Yeah, and you embalm that for 6. It works really well when you get a whole bunch of embalm stuff going, because you can make all those unwavering initiate tokens bigger.
This crab's getting so smart.
Oh my
Cartouche
goodness.
of Knowledge, flying 2/6 crab.
He's so shiny.
Wow, where's Marshall to see this? He's just giggling over there.
He was a drab little crab once.
Shelly, you've really made it. Do you but seriously, do you play the crab in your draft decks?
In sealed, I actually like the crab.
Okay.
In a lot of sealed decks here. I do not love the crab in this draft format, which breaks my heart. Because when I first read through the card list, I was like, oh, I'm going to be crabbing so much. I'm going to go crabbing, going to get some fish heads. But
it's just better in sealed because generally a slower format, you're able to block anything early game.
yeah, it's harder to end up playing against somebody who has, a whole bunch of exert creatures and things that can power through it. It's just it's a much better card in a sealed deck where people have generic creatures that don't have those exert abilities and they don't have the types of pump spells that interact perfectly with their set of creatures.
We just had a Winds of Rebuke, so R.I.P. Shelly. I guess she's not dead. She just got bounced, but her cartouche fell off. And an Anointer Priest in play for Jessup, which the Aven Wind Guide does play very nicely with the Priest. Gaining 1 life for every creature token that enters the battlefield under your control. Here's an Aven Initiate, followed up by a Ruthless Sniper.
Ooh. That Aven Initiate did not look especially impressive because of the Aven Wind Guide on the other side of the table, but with that Ruthless Sniper on the board, and suddenly it's nothing to scoff at.
So we'll see in some upcoming turns here if BBD has some cycling or discard in his hand to deal with some of what Jessup has built up so far this game.
The thing that's interesting here, though, is that Brian has a life advantage, and he can be attacking with this Aven Initiate, even if he doesn't have any cycling card, and Andrew basically has to respect that. He's not just going to attempt to make a trade like his 4-mana guy for the other 4-mana guy when Brian could just pay 2 mana and draw a card and win the fight. He might block with that, though.
Jessup's, I see your Aven Initiate and play one of my own. Ruthless Sniper we've talked about before. Just a great card.
Yeah, it's, for a 1-mana creature and limited, you can't really ask for much more than that card. I think it's first pickable. Because
really?
It's the type of card that can really, affect the rest of your picks. And if you can get multiples of them, they get more powerful with each extra one you get. It's kind of like the opposite of a fan bearer that gets worse in multiples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I told the story a little earlier. I played against somebody who had 3 Ruthless Snipers, and they were like, fingers crossed that you don't have any damage, 2 damage to everything.
Yeah, I mean, in a set like this, those types of effects only come at rare. So, Crab back in action.
Shelly back out there after her brief rest. We're going to see an Embalm now on Oketra's Attendant, gaining a life off of the Anointer Priest and tapping down the Aven Initiate thanks to Binding Mummy. Aven Wind Guide and the Initiate are going to get in for 5. And here we see the strength of a Binding Mummy in a deck that isn't traditionally a zombie deck, but is an Embalm deck, which all the Embalm creatures are zombies, so becomes relevant here as well. We saw it earlier, pretty effective in a black-white deck.
Yeah, very, very good in black-white, which allows it to, be like a very aggressive type of card. In these blue-white decks, it often, lets you win these like turtley races by tapping down flyers in the air and letting you win the race up there.
Whew. Cartouche of Ambition for Braun-Duin on an Aven Initiate is going to mean a major life point swing here. Gaining 4 life, potentially dealing 4. There you see it. It also puts a -1/-1 counter on target creature when it enters the battlefield. You see it was there placed on the Aven Initiate.
And that's just awesome for Braun-Duin here.
How many times today have we seen somebody slam Cartouche of Ambition and completely swing the game back in their favor?
Yeah, it's a great card. I think in Sealed, it may be better than Cartouche of Knowledge, which is interesting that one of the cartouches, that there's a flip of which is the best and second best and things like that between draft and sealed.
Yeah, that is interesting, actually. And it's important to know because if you want to level
Yeah.
up your game, this is the kind of stuff you have to think about. Not everything is going to be the same power level in draft as it is in sealed and vice versa. Here comes a Bone Picker for Braun-Duin. 3/2 Flying Death Touch. Andrew Jessup sitting at 17 life, Braun-Duin at 13. Blue-white flyer seems like a perfectly fine strategy to try out in sealed.
Yeah, I mean, it's blue-white is just as good as it normally is. It may be a little bit worse in this set, but in a format like sealed, you're often finding yourself, just forced to play what you've opened. And there are a lot of great white cards, and blue's uncommon suite and rare suite is just so good.
Here's another Oketra's Attendant. Yeah, if you open 2, you're probably playing white.
Now this Aven Initiate here, it's going to have a lot of trouble attacking into this board, even with the Rootless Sniper on his side. It also looks like Brian is kind of running low on cards at this point.
Yeah. He does have some good stuff going on. It's just that Jessup's creatures match up pretty well against his. And a cartouche is not something you just want to throw away. Blue-black, known for its ability to be a cycling deck, primarily.
Yeah, that's definitely the best way to draft blue and black together. blue-white when you're drafting them, I feel like those decks are really the card advantage decks of the format, if you will.
Braun-Duin getting in there with the Aven Initiate, Labyrinth Guardian, and Festering Mummy, which when it dies will give a -1/-1 counter. Target creature. I played against a Festering Mummy with a Glory Bound Initiate, which was so sad. I mean,
you have this like super high power card.
Yeah.
It's got this stupid mummy. I like things like that about Magic, though. That the terrible card can match up really well against the ultra powerful card.
Yeah, I agree.
It's one of the reasons why the game is, so interesting.
And a lot of people have said, that this format has been extremely fun to play and is challenging and complex in its interactions like that I think make it good, like you said, when a common can match up pretty well, in some cases against a rare. Jessup considering blocks here. Yeah, he's got to be careful considering that -1/-1 counter from the mummy potentially. Is just going to block on the Labyrinth Guardian with the Anointer Priest.
Wow. That's very surprising to me.
Falling down to 8.
Letting that Aven Initiate get through when you're in this spot where it looks like a racing situation. It's going to be really hard to race lifelink on the other side of the table like that. This crab is looking especially boring in a world of flyers. Other side of the table. I think when your opponent is blue and white, that is possibly the worst.
The worst place for a crab to be.
Worst place for a crab to be.
You want your crab against like something Marshall?
Yeah. Did you know that the banks of the Luxor River attract all manner of predator, but only the most resilient of prey?
Oh, really?
Which, I think is kind of a knock on the predators of Amonkhet.
Yeah.
They seem very smart, And how long has it been around to be ancient?
Oh, for a crab? Quite a while. They
Oh.
can live a long time. Do you know lobsters have...
They're biologically immortal?
Yes,
I
that's
did
what I was
know
just going to
that,
say. Negligible senescence. Senescence? I never say it right. Look it up. Wikipedia that.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. You could have a pet lobster in your family for like thousands of generations if you just keep it alive.
Cool. I have some friends who are married and got a turtle for their anniversary, and then that just kind of like ages with them in their marriage because it'll probably outlive them.
That's great. I like it.
Lay Bare the Heart is the play here from Braun-Duin.
Yeah, he sees a mighty leap in a supply caravan.
You choose a non-legendary, non-land card from your opponent's hand, and they must discard it.
I've actually been pretty impressed with this card, both in draft and sealed. Normally, I'm not a big fan of discard spells, but the fact that this can hit basically anything means that it's very rarely dead. And you can almost always use it. Like even in the later stages of the game where your opponent has a few cards in hand and they just have like a combat trick that they could respond with, you can just use that and then pass the turn, and it often sets you up for victory later on.
Yeah, it's not something I would normally consider to be something I would want to run, but it's certainly made some waves here today. We've seen it cast in 2 different games.
My favorite game I saw today was Joel Larson attacking with a 7/7 on turn 3.
So
Or 7/6, I apologize.
Supply Caravan comes into play without its 1/1 warrior friend for Andrew Jessup. Just a 2/5. And you said this card makes the cut more often than not. Do you think it's because it's extra good, or it's just like, put it in there?
I wouldn't even say more often than not. I think it's just, the thing is, it's like this 3/5 that is really good for racing situations, because you get this chump blocker alongside it, and you also get this thing that can actually block a lot of the exert creatures.
Sure.
Which is a real rarity. So I find it to be really good in the aggressive white mirrors when I'm drafting. And I like sideboarding it in for those matchups.
We've achieved something of a board stall here. Jessup's just going to pass the turn right back, sitting at 8 life to Braun-Duin's 15.
And this is the beauty of sealed deck, is you get in these situations.
This is the first one we've seen today, really.
Yeah, I mean, these staring contests, though, these are situations where, navigating combat is really valuable. And this is a skill that you don't really get from playing a lot of Constructed. And even draft these days, you're, not getting into these really stalled up, weird combat situations as often as you might have in the past. So here we get to see, what a long game is going to look like. And Andrew seems to be drawing pretty nicely with the Curator of Mysteries.
Curator of Mysteries, so 4/4, flyer for 4. Whenever you discard or cycle, scry 1. This in the category of cards that you would never cycle, but it does in fact itself have cycling for a single blue.
Yes. You might cycle it to, draw some extra cards or to hit a land drop and then...
Yeah, if you were pretty hard up.
That was actually my preview card.
Oh, this was?
From Amonkhet, Curator of Mysteries.
Awesome. Have you gotten a chance to play with it yet?
I have. Yeah. I've cast it on turn 3 with a Naga Vitalist many times already.
There's a lot of good Sphinx in this set. We've got Curator of Mysteries. We have Glyph Keeper. Maybe that's just 2, but they're both excellent. Glyph Keeper up there as well for top best cards of the set.
Oh, yeah. Definitely one of the better cards.
All right, Wasteland Scorpion was cycled for Braun-Duin, putting a -1/-1 counter on the Curator, and is going to play another Aven Initiate and pass the turn back. So I have a question for you, JVL. In these sorts of situations where it's kind of like Drago, we both have a ton of creatures, we're sitting here looking at each other, do you feel stronger in this situation, or does this kind of thing make you panic?
This is the best. This is how Magic was meant to be played. This is, when you're playing on the blacktop, a million years ago, and everybody's got a trillion creatures in play, and combat's impossible. And, this is... Because when somebody attacks, it's just, the biggest mess, right? The board is just a mess. People, you try to do math, but it's so complicated, and it's... this is really... so much fun. And in these situations, they've done a good job over the last few years of finding stall breaker type of cards to include in sets. So those do exist in this set. However, it doesn't seem like any of those cards, things like Open into Wonder or anything, would be a card that either of these decks would want to play. So somebody's going to have to pull the trigger, and it looks like Andrew Jessup is doing that right here. He's going to go for an attack.
Here we see Aven Initiate trading there with the Curator of Mysteries. Aven Wind Guide and Oketra's Attendant getting in there and knocking BBD down to 8. Andrew Jessup at 9. He was able to tap down the Cartouche Initiate with Binding Mummy earlier because Takrap Elite came back as an embalmed creature token, which, as we noted before, is a zombie.
This is interesting. Looks like Braun-Duin has drawn another cycling card. He's going to have to figure out what he wants to do with his Aven Initiate.
All right, he's going to get in there. So depending on how Jessup blocks, you can cycle it away to give something -1/-1. When's the right point, do you think, when you know that you should pull the trigger on an attack on a board state like this?
That's a really hard question because I feel like it's different in almost every game.
Sure.
You know, sometimes you're waiting to draw a particular card, and you know that like you're going to, you know, slam the gas pedal the moment that card is drawn. Sometimes you're anticipating your opponent go for it, if you will. And I think those are my favorite types of situations, is just waiting for them to go for it first. Because in really board-stalled situations, more often than not, the player that wins the game is going to be the player that
Held out the longest.
Like chose not to attack. Because the swing back is always what wins. You know, the first attack is somebody panicking often.
Yeah, like I mentioned.
Yeah, and whoa, there's so much stuff on the table. I don't know what to do. I think my stuff's better. I'm just going to turn it all sideways and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that attack by BBD brought Jessup down to 5, gained him some life back up to 12. My dad coached me in hockey for many years, and what he would often say is, wait for them to make a mistake.
Yeah. Being reactive is so good in, you know, every type of like gaming situation. Getting to see what they're doing and then being able to use your cards in their most effective manner.
Well, here we see a cycling off of a dual land, a canyon slough. Avon Wind Guide down.
I think Brian needs to draw a card off that. Canyon Slough. He may have already drawn one, and I missed it.
Avon Wind Guide, of course, with Embalm for 6. Can just come right on back. Will trigger the Anointer Priest to gain a life, which can be relevant when you're at such a low life total.
This is so interesting here.
I am just fascinated because it's situations like this where the reason I asked you that question is because I'll be sitting here and I'm just like, the clock is ticking down. I'm like, oh no, you know, maybe I'm down a match or something. I better just attack to get something to happen, which is entirely wrong. Even Initiate getting in again, blocked by Oketra's Attendant. Here we have a cycle off of Stir the Sands. So Braun-Duin is going to make a 2/2 zombie creature token. He's going to be able to put a -1/-1 counter on something with Ruthless Sniper and draw a card. Pretty good deal.
That's a really good deal.
And here's a Shimmer Scale Drake, and it really is a Shimmer Scale. It's a foil.
I think it would have been wise if that was the only foil you could get in the set. It's just like piles on piles of foil Shimmer Scale Drakes.
You know, we... Here comes the Wind Guide, I believe, Embalm back.
You know, Los Embalm. These games are very interesting.
Main event players, Alexander Smith and Ryan McGraw, the blue Grand Prix stage.
Yeah, this is something they do need to be cognizant of the time on the clock as well. Here's another cartouche.
Yeah.
All right.
Very good.
Double cartouche on that Avon Initiate. That Initiate is very ambitious.
It is.
Miasmic Mummy, please discard the last card in your hand. It was a land.
I both those have
Swinging
that
for 5.
magic number 4 toughness.
Yep.
That's it.
Jessup extends a hand. Braun-Duin takes down the match 2-0. What a slog that was at the end there.
Yeah, and Braun-Duin really played that quite well. He was able to, you know, convince Andrew to try to turn it into a long-term racing situation, and Andrew started trying to attack his opponent because he just wasn't comfortable playing a very long game, and BBD took advantage of it.
And just like you said, normally the person who goes for it first, sometimes the person who loses.
Yeah, I think that's how things end up more often than not.
And here we have a look in with Ely versus Koji. We saw a little bit of their first game.
Oh my goodness.
Tied all up at 1-1, and it looks like Koji has just been cursed.
Yeah.
Wow. Cruel Reality. So this card costs 7 mana.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to either sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker, and if you can't, you lose 5 life.
Card is really quite good.
Meanwhile, Ely's at 1, and Koji's at 37.
It's a general run-of-the-mill game of Magic.
Wow.
For what it's worth, Ely has an Oracle's Vault with 3 bricks on it.
Oh, you did say you wanted to see this card in action today.
Did say that I wanted to see this.
Koji attacking with the Labyrinth Guardian and those who serve. Eli's going to block with his snipers, cycle his Desert Ceradon to put -1/-1 counters.
All right, so both of the snipers are going to live.
Oh, he is just hanging on for dear life here. That Oracle's Vault.
This is crazy.
I really hope he casts Cruel Reality off of it, even though he does have enough mana. Temet, Vizier of Noctimoon, is going to come back as an embalmed creature here, which is actually better for this card because at the beginning of combat on your step, you can give a creature token +1/+1 and unblockable. All right, spin the wheel. Mountain.
That's not what we want
Dang.
the wheel to hit.
Were you hoping for Emrakul?
Yeah, that's what I want, I want Oracle's Vault to hit cards like Emrakul.
All right, Trial of Ambition will force Koji to sacrifice a creature. He's doing a lot of sacrificing. Down goes the Labyrinth Guardian. Does have Embalm for 4, though. One is not 0, as they say.
Yeah, 1 is not 0, and with an Oracle's Vault in play, Ely can grind his way back into this game. I mean, things aren't looking that bad for him. The problem is that Koji, looked like, his only source of reach is now gone, thanks to those Ruthless Snipers.
Battlefield Scavengers, a play for Ely. Looks like he's sitting on a pair of lands in hand.
And Ely's going to start needing to be aggressive because, it's looking like it's a difficult situation at this point for him to, win before he decks himself. Koji's at 35 now. Ely's, drawing, 2 to 3 cards a turn.
Has to sacrifice those who serve to Cruel Reality.
Yeah, luckily, Cruel Reality ends games pretty quickly.
And that's exactly what Ely needs to have happen. Unfortunately, Koji is not going to go down that quickly at 35 life here. Although left with only 1 creature and an Edifice of Authority. Oh, there's a Glyph Keeper in Koji's graveyard. Has the potential to be embalmed. Looks like he's attacking with this Devoted Cropmate.
Yeah, Ely said 1. I mean,
He's going to exert to get back. Looks like Labyrinth Guardian, creature with power 2 or less. Gravedigger will jump in front. Koji's just like, well, I'm just going to keep coming at you.
Yeah. That's all he can really do.
Glyph Keeper returns embalmed. 3/5. the first time it's the target of a spell or ability, you counter that.
Yep.
So pretty hard to kill. Also pretty hard to put a -1/-1 counter on the first time. All right, we spun the wheel. Thresher Lizard. Not too terribly exciting, but you know, it's free. I'll take a free
It's
lizard.
free. It's just a 4/4. 4/4 tapping your artifact.
Magic players, Gavin, Freidinger, please report to custom.
All right, we've got the Battlefield Scavenger exerted this turn, allowing Ely to rummage. And in turn, putting 2 -1/-1 counters on the Labyrinth Guardian.
Yeah, I mean, so much going on here. Ely with those 2 snipers in play really probably thought he had this one close to locked up at this point.
Electrify manages to clear Koji's board. 2 cards in hand. Sitting with that curse. You know what? I do actually think the curse cards are kind of cool. There's
Yep.
this and Trespasser's Curse in this set.
Mm-hmm.
And while Trespasser's Curse isn't very strong, unless it hits you potentially on turn 2, I do think the idea of it is really neat, especially in a set like Amonkhet. Oh, Koji's like, count your graveyard, count your library, please.
He's like, how many turns do I have to stay alive to win this game? I'm at 33.
Ely's gonna crash in with his team here, dropping Koji to 28.
Once again, players in the 3 p.m. Seal Spectacular. Your pairings for round number
As, Ely seems to be holding a few lands in his hand, which seems surprising with the Thresher Lizard on the table.
That's true. Labyrinth Guardian coming back embalmed. Some more sacrifice fodder or perhaps a blocker.
remaining to sign up for one of our last on-demand events of the evening. If you would like to play one last Amonkhet booster draft or perhaps a commander,
Yeah, Ely had 1 life here this whole time,
Can he hang on?
just hoping to hold on. And there are so many cards to just end the game.
Koji's like, you're at 1. All right, Splendid Agony taking down the Scavenger. We have a Minotaur Sure Shot hitting the table here. Koji says the lizard cannot attack or block. Back comes Dread Wanderer from the graveyard. Just a 2/1. But every piece of power counts here in this game.
Yeah, and Koji is facing the cruel reality of cruel reality. He's been, fortunate enough to have those creatures to embalm, though, over the last few turns. Hasn't been, doing much. But he's just going to continue to flounder here. It does not look good for him. I mean, Ely may have a few cards left in the library, but he is so solidly in control of this game.
Oh, one of our favorite finishers here. Merciless Javelineer, 4/2, pay 2 mana, discard a card, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. That creature cannot block this turn.
Yes, now he can attack for 10 plus whatever he chooses to pump. All right, so he's going to just make it 6 by...
All right, these players, you can see the clock has ticked down to 0. They do have a 6-minute extension. But Crop Spearmaster, the play for Koji.
And not what he wants to be drawing at this stage of the game.
All right, Javelineer just going to shoot it down.
Tyler Manti, your draft is
Everybody who's not iced gets in.
Please come to the on-demand
Koji extends a hand. That'll do it. Wow. Ely takes down the match 2 games to 1. 1 is not 0. We'll be back after these brief messages here at Grand Prix Richmond.